Conservatives should be realistic enough to recognize that this country is going deeper into socialism and will see expansion of federal power whether Republicans or Democrats are in power. The only comfort they may have is that the pace will be slower under Richard Nixon than it might have been under Hubert H. Humphrey. Conservatives are going to have to recognize that the Nixon administration will embrace most of the socialism of the Democratic administrations while professing to improve it. So we've seen that just go, whether it's Republicans or Democrats in power, they just all do the same thing, saying, well, we're going to do it better than they did. They were screwing it up. And that's really all that's happening, and then socialism's just happening.
Yeah, they all have their slogan, make a big change or whatnot.
And tyranny, communism just keeps getting thicker and thicker. The establishment promotes the idea of the inevitability of communism through its perversion of terms used in describing the political spectrum. See Chart 1. We are told that the far left of the political spectrum, we find communism, which is admittedly dictatorial. But we are also told that that equally to be feared is the opposite of the far left, i.e. the far right, which is labeled fascism. We are constantly told that we should try to stay in the middle of the road, which is termed democracy, but by which the establishment means Fabian or creeping socialism. The fact that the middle of the road has been moving inexorably toward leftward for 40 years is ignored. Here is an excellent example of the use of false alternatives. We are given the choice between communism, international socialism, on one end of the spectrum, Nazism, National Socialism on the other end, or Fabian socialism in the middle. But the whole spectrum is socialist. That is absurd. Where would you put an anarchist on the spectrum? Where do you put a person who believes in a constitutional republic and the free enterprise system? He is not represented here, yet this spectrum is used for political definitions by a probable 90% of the people of the nation. And here there's a chart which just shows that the media, the extreme right, they're just saying, the extreme right who thinks, okay, we're very conservative and moral and we want to tell you all what to do, that's seen as very fascist and we don't want that kind of government. But at the other end is like extreme communism, like a communist dictatorship where there's like a Stalinistic or Hitler party in charge for forcing equality, and we know that's not right. So we think democracy is really the balance between the two, but they're both bad. And it's...
So they're like, no,
and the people that want to talk about an actual free constitutional republic, which is hard, but it is possible to do. People like Ron Paul, these people are not given any space in the mainstream. They're just not talked about. It's just completely covered up. Okay. There's an accurate political... Okay, and then here they've got kind of how it's given to us. And then down here, you've got total government on one side, total anarchy on the other. But right next to anarchy is a constitutional republic, which is a limited government. And that's a big, big, big philosophical concept to talk about. And it's hard to talk about. It's what the period of enlightenment with Francis Bacon and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and all these guys, they put it together, but they warned us it can be corrupted real easy if you get stupid and lazy. And we did. This is where we ended up. So he's saying there's an accurate political spectrum right there, which I just showed you. Communism is, by definition, total government. If you have total government, it makes little difference whether you call it communism, fascism, socialism, Caesarism, or Pharaohism. It's all pretty much the same under the standpoint of the people who must live and suffer under it. If total government, by any of its pseudonyms, stands on the far left, then by logic, the far right should represent anarchy, or no government. Our founding fathers revolted against the near-total government of the English monarchy. But they knew that having no government at all would lead to chaos, so they set up a constitutional republic with a very limited government. They knew that men prospered in freedom. Although the free enterprise system is not mentioned specifically in the Constitution, it is the only one which can exist under a constitutional republic. All collectivist systems require power in government, which the Constitution did not grant. Our founding fathers had no intention of allowing the government to become an instrument to steal the fruit of one man's labor and give it to another who had not earned it. Our government was to be one of severely limited powers. Thomas Jefferson said, in questions of power, then let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by chains of constitution. Jefferson knew that if the government were not enslaved, the people would be. It was Jefferson's view that government governs best which governs least. Our forefathers established this country with the very least possible amount of government. Although they lived in an age before automobiles, electric lights, and television, they understood human nature and its relation to political systems far better than do most Americans today. Times change, technology changes, but principles are eternal. Primarily, government was to provide for national defense and to establish a court system. But we have burst the chains that Jefferson spoke of, and for many years now we have been moving leftward across the political spectrum towards collectivist total government. Every proposal by our political leaders, including some which are supposed to have the very opposite effect, such as Nixon's revenue-sharing proposal, carries us further leftward to centralized government. This is not because socialism is inevitable. It is no more inevitable than Pharaohism. It is largely the result of clever planning and patient gradualism. Since all communists and their insider bosses are waging a constant struggle for socialism, let us define that term. Socialism is usually defined as government ownership and or control over the basic means of production and distribution of goods and services. When analyzed, this means government control over everything, including you. All controls are people controls. If the government controls these areas, it can eventually do just exactly as Marx set out to do: destroy the right to private property, eliminate the family, and wipe out religion. We are being socialized in America, and everybody knows it. If we had a chance to sit down and have a cup of coffee with the man in the street that we have been interviewing, he might say, you know, the one thing I can never figure out is why all these very wealthy people like the Kennedys, the Fords, and the Rockefellers, and others are for socialism. Why are the super rich for socialism? Don't they have the most to lose? I take a look at my bank account and compare it with Nelson Rockefeller's, and it seems funny that I'm against socialism and he's out promoting it. Or is it funny? In reality, there is a vast difference between what the promoters define as socialism and what it is in actual practice. The idea that socialism is a share the wealth program is strictly a confidence game to get the people to surrender their freedom to an all-powerful collectivist government. While the insiders tell us we are building a paradise on earth, we are actually constructing a jail for ourselves. Doesn't it strike you as strange that some of the individuals pushing hardest for socialism have their own personal wealth protected in family trusts and tax-free foundations? Men like Rockefeller, Ford, and Kennedy are for every socialist program known to man which will increase your taxes, yet they pay little, if anything, in taxes themselves. An article published by the North American Newspaper Alliance in August of 1967 tells how the Rockefellers pay practically no income taxes despite their vast wealth. The article reveals that one of the Rockefellers paid the grand total of $685 personal income tax during a recent year. The Kennedys have their Chicago Merchandise Mart, their mansions, yachts, planes, etc., all owned by their myriads of family foundations and trusts. Taxes are for peons. Yet, hypocrites like Rockefeller, Ford, and Kennedy pose as great champions of the downtrodden. If they were really concerned about the poor rather than using socialism as a means of achieving personal political power, they would divest themselves of their own fortunes. There is no law which prevents them from giving away their own fortunes to the poverty-stricken. Shouldn't these men set an example and practice what they preach? If they advocate sharing the wealth, shouldn't they start with their own instead of that of the middle class, which pays almost all the taxes? Why don't Nelson Rockefeller and Henry Ford II give away all their wealth, retaining only enough to place themselves at the national average? Can't you imagine Ted Kennedy giving up his mansion, airplane, yacht, and moving into a $25,000 home with a $20,000 mortgage like the rest of us? We're usually told that this clique of super rich are socialists because they have a guilt complex over wealth they inherited and did not earn. Again, they could relieve these supposed guilt complexes simply by divesting themselves of their unearned wealth. There are doubtless many wealthy do-gooders who have been given a guilt complex by their college professors, but that doesn't explain the actions of insiders like the Rockefellers, Fords, or Kennedys. All their actions portray them as power seekers.